sorting people right away. Hello, welcome to OSE Can You See? We are here the first, third, and fifth Wednesday of the month at 7 p.m. GRTV channel 25 if you have Comcast. And we have been doing this for 22 and a half years. Very long, sometimes boring, sometimes very exciting years. Today we have the good, the bad, and the whatever, or the good enough. Is there black and white and gray? Is there any black and white, or is it all gray? Is it all black? Is it all white? Is it all good? Is it all bad? It's how we perceive things, if they're black or white. I could stand in a white room, close my eyes, and it would look black. So which one is it? Is it a black room or a white room when I'm standing in it? It's just about your perceptions, and everyone's perceptions are different, obviously. They're usually shaped by your friends, family, your religion, your education level, your status, I guess, financially, if you're well off or if you're poor. You might see if you're working, if you're unemployed, if you're handicapped, you can't walk, going into a building that has one step up into it. Everyone says, oh, that's no big deal. I didn't even notice it had that step. Well, with somebody in a wheelchair, they're going to be like, I would never go in there. That's horrible. Why would they have that one step where, that boundary where they can't get in? It makes it a bad shop all of a sudden because, one little thing that nobody else notices, but just it's their perception that's a bad shop because they can't get into it. Other things like that. Is there, if you work, one of the things that we hear about lately, the coal miners, I mean, it's, we know that coal is dirty to burn and to use for electricity, but we've been doing it for several years. But there's also people that have been working in those jobs that they want a job and they want that coal to still be used so that they can thrive in their own personal life. And so the perception to them is that coal is good because that puts food on my table. Well, to the rest of us, it's hurting our environment and not very sustainable. So what makes it good or bad? Is it just a gray area that we're never going to be able to jump? And then there's, scientific fact that it's bad, but it's also a scientific fact that guy's family is probably going to starve to death if he doesn't have a job to buy food. So these are all still facts, but they're just not, they're just different sides of the perception of them. You often hear different sides of two coins, but same government as the one coin. Which one's the good side, which one's the bad side, heads or tails. Tonight I have two guests with me to talk about what's good and what's bad and what our perceptions of to make everything, how we fit it all together in our society. I have Blue with the blue shirt on, and on the end I have Ed Skelly to help me talk about these issues. One of the things that I wanted to specifically say, because I was watching this movie recently, in this movie, there's surveillance 24/7 all the time, and everyone thinks that this is great because they can catch criminals when they're stealing stuff, or you can even rewind your life and find where you left your keys when you can't find them, but then also other bad things happen.
Is that The Circle?
I did see The Circle, but
That's kind of similar, isn't it?
yeah, it's very like that.
Very transparent.
It's also the Black Mirror has this type thing too. Yeah.
You see the circle?
No, but I can tell you a real life, actually happening story that matches perfectly with what you're saying. They took this eye in the sky technology that they're mastering over in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they have tried to propose its use to local law enforcement on regional levels. One place that they put it into practice for only a trial, it was a set-up thing where they're only going to do it for 30 days, no matter how well or how poorly it worked, whatever, was in Dayton, Ohio. And what was going on is there was a drone in the air with this huge high-resolution camera that was just constantly taking a picture of the entire city. And one of the first cases that came in to be solved, and this is the positive side, is someone calls into 911 and says, hey, there's a moving van in my neighbor's driveway, and I didn't think my neighbor was moving. I know them. I don't think it belongs there. And the police show up, and the van's already gone. But it goes in, and all this information from this aerial view is being stored, and they can look up where and time and so forth. They can go right back instantly, identify this van. They find 15 minutes later that it's sitting in the parking lot of like a Lowe's or Home Depot. Here come the police, they actually get the criminals, and these cases are never solved. Once they're out of the driveway, they're gone.
Right.
So that sounds positive.
Yep.
But then you've got the scenario, though, where everybody is being recorded 24 hours a day. And the local people were more freaked out by it than that side was a lot stronger in opinion than people who were, pro, yay, we're solving some crimes. And they didn't do it. But a more interesting case, and this ties into the conversation perfectly. Here in America, a lot of people are like, oh no, this is bad. But when you promote it in a slightly different context, all of a sudden it's great. They do this down in Juarez. And in Juarez, they used it in a very short period of time to bust a whole drug cartel.
Oh, wow.
And they were able to actually track these people because of this very sad case where this female police officer leaves her home. She was being tracked by these men who they watch it all, do it all on the video and everything. They were up the street waiting for her to leave. They end up a few traffic lights down the road. They gun her down. But then they track where these vehicles go and their behaviors and who they're coming in contact with. And they end up eventually at the headquarters of their cartel. And they bring down this whole cartel. But it's real easy to be like, oh, look at that. That's great. Look what they did. But we don't want it in our own sky.
I know, right?
It's, the context changes when it's being done somewhere else. It's almost like, in a way, we're falling guilty of subjugating people.
So what is it that we don't like about it? Is it because we don't want to get caught picking our nose?
Well,
Or do we want to get worried? Or do we want to get away with crimes?
if you get honest with yourself, you find out that you're not always sweetness and light.
No,
There's a lot of
exactly.
dark energy in most everybody. That's where Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde comes from. We hide away the dark stuff, but there's a lot of Dr. Jekyll, who's a nice guy, and there's a lot of the Mr. Hyde, who's the mean son of a bitch inside of us.
Let's say that
Even the nicest people.
75% of people, let's just throw this out there, because it's high enough that everybody will be like, whatever, maybe it's not really that high, but maybe 75% of people on a weekly basis are doing something they don't want anybody to know about.
Yeah.
Maybe they're people having an affair, maybe they're doing this, maybe they're doing that, who knows? But I bet 75% of people possibly do something they don't want to be found out for. But
Like
just
jacking
the
off.
same, is that the real motivation though? Or is it the philosophical, I don't think anyone has a right to be watching me? Because there's a strong argument to be made for that.
Certain behaviors in society are not tolerated, and if you do it in privacy, which is where you're supposed to do it,
Right.
it's okay, but when they make their privacy the public thing, then suddenly you're whacking off, which is perfectly healthy.
Right.
And
Well, I thought
They make
someone
you look
having an
like some
affair was
kind
a
of sex
perfect,
pervert.
example because it was like, it wasn't
Everybody
really,
pees in the bushes once in a while, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. Well, so
And they
let-
catch that on film, and
So
pretty soon you're the guy that peed in the bushes.
but wait a minute.
Well, and if you're homeless,
Would
you
it-
might now be a sexual offender.
But what if 75% of the people are doing it, like Ed says? But now we all see them doing it.
Well, see, I've heard good arguments about that. If there's
So
no
then it
great.
doesn't become a bad
That'd be great
thing
if we
anymore.
could lighten up on the Peyton Place stuff.
That'd
But
be
most
how
of us hide
real-
a certain amount of stuff we don't want other people to see.
Right. That's how real democracy should work. So let's say these cameras are catching 75% of people peeing in bushes, and it's like, oh, all of a sudden, if that many people are doing it, then it should be legal, and we should be.
Look what
a
happened with Hillary.
Well, yeah.
I mean, Hillary tried to explain to this group that sometimes the president has to twist the truth a little bit, depending on who they're talking to. And that came across with Trump. Oh, she's a liar. What a liar. So what have we had from Trump? Nothing but twisted truths from day one. You know,
Yeah.
he's the con man of all con men.
The father of birthing. Yes.
Yeah, he's a classic con man.
Yeah.
People believe him. You know,
Oh, yeah.
They have confidence.
They
in
love him.
Well,
It's usually they love him or they hate him.
it seems though the people who really love him, they may be loud, but they're, his approval ratings wouldn't be so low if they really existed in high numbers. The people.
Agreed.
Now they're out there, and there are people who cannot see any faults with him, and there's this really, profane blind faith thing going. When we talk about the cult of personality that we should always beware, that's him. People were afraid that Barack Obama was going to be a cult of personality like that.
Yeah.
But
You're right, Trump is the cult of personality.
Very much.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I felt like I did a second ago.
Well, the biggest problem with the cult of personality is that you give these guys so much power to destroy things. They can start wars, they can drop nuclear weapons on people, they can twist the media the way they want it to sound. And look at what happened with Bush W. when he tried to get the rah-rah thing going for the Iraqi war. There was not one dissenting voice. Everybody was there.
There was. Bernie
Not
Sanders.
in the mainstream media.
Nobody talked about him, but Bernie Sanders was speaking up about that stuff back then.
They never showed him. back
I
then.
know they
They
did.
did not want to.
But when we say there's not one, I just wanted to point out that he did do that.
These guys are massaging group psyches in such a way that they can get away with this stuff, this blatant lie, and get away with it. Because people really want to believe, they really do want to believe in Santa Claus.
Oh, yes.
They want to believe they're going to
People
get
like-
something for nothing.
Well, people love that feeling of being the swollen-chested, I'm justified to now be harsh because you're bad.
Yeah, and we're the bad guys to them because we question things, and they go, "Why?" I don't know how many times in my life I've been asked, "Why do you even care? Why do you question anything? What's the point of questioning stuff? Just go along with it." You know?
There's that. Make your life very simple and just follow the masses.
What? I don't know about you guys,
Follow
but I am not
something.
capable of doing that.
Normal
at all.
people are defined by following the norms, right?
Yeah.
Creative people transcend that bourgeois restriction and develop capabilities way beyond that. They can penetrate into other realities besides fashion. Where normal people are trapped in the fashion world. They have to be normal,
Well, that's what they condition us, right? In school, we have to sit down and do the lesson that everybody else is doing. We all listen to the teacher, do exactly what the teacher's doing. We have to
Brick
do
in
that
the wall.
for 12 years. We have to do exactly what the teacher's telling us to do. Sit still, be quiet, and as long as you're quiet like the kid next to you, everything's fine. The teacher's happy. As soon as one kid, acts up, then the teacher it's just chaos. Oh, now I told you, now go down to the principal's. And everyone else's life is disrupted for that one kid who won't sit down and do his work. And so,
Yeah, that's
so then, you learn, oh shit, well, I'm not going to stand up either because I don't want to disrupt everybody else when the teacher gets mad.
That's right.
So then we all just stay sitting for 12 years, and then we have to learn that.
That's how
Yeah.
power structures work, though. You know, you make such an example of, you know, the one person who stands up. You know,
Yeah.
Colin Kaepernick's a great example.
Yes.
You make such an example of him, not because of what you're doing to him, but because of the statement you're making to everybody else about this is what we're going to do to you if you stand or if
Yes.
you kneel. You know, in this case, but you know, there's, yeah.
Well, you ask yourself, has it ever been different?
I don't think so.
Have people who we consider to be creative ever, throughout history, not run into that sort of social consciousness that wants you to just be quiet and sit down?
Yeah.
See,
Nobody's killing us for what we're saying. I mean, we do enjoy something that's unique within
yes,
the
There is
area.
that.
creative people are dangerous people because once you break free of the groupthink and aren't just mesmerized by more and better like they have with the advertising, then you start to see that there's a sort of timeless flow of events that you can penetrate, like Einstein did, with the whole idea of relativity theory and traveling at the speed of light, what that must be like when time stops. And everything becomes connected. You know,
Well-
it doesn't move. Relating to us, it moves at 186,000 miles a second.
Correct.
But relating to itself, it's totally still. You know. So like, it gets to profound thinking about time and what's real and how we create time.
I was just going to say, time is just a manifestation of what we've made it.
Yeah, we interpret
It's
it.
arbitrary almost.
We're always distorted. The moment you think, you distort. The only way to see clearly is to have a hollow mind that's free. They say the pickup truck's only valuable when it's empty. It's most able to do the work when there's nothing in it. Otherwise, it's got all these encumberments. And most of us get caught in the perception of encumberments. And I used to think that normal people were kind of deadly because they had the most psychological problems, but they could never admit it to themselves. It was only people that were neurotic and creative that seemed to have that ability to step back a little bit and say, maybe I'm wrong. You know, maybe things aren't the way I thought they were.
It's
and
all
have the floor
perspective.
drop out. And then you learn that you actually got wings and you can fly. You know, there's so many things that you will never know as long as you live in a world of fear.
You know, and I don't know, it's just interesting, it popped in my mind as you were saying that, and I agree with you. But a voice that we don't often recognize is what would socially seem the polar opposite of that, and that within some of these structures of normalcy, you do find a very, very small subsect of people who use those, say, normal venues to come to spaces of greater consciousness as well. But on an extreme, because they're not the majority. Like, say, take people who, say, Christians in America. Don't get me wrong, and I'm not trying to pick on Christians. I don't mean this in this way, but you have some people where it's more show and tell. It's more all the stereotypes that take place. But there's a subsect of people who are using it as a way to meditate and to be more conscious of themselves and their motivations and so forth. But they're a subsect, and you know, they're not the squeaky wheel. We don't think of them even when we think of people like that. But it was like, for instance, an American Christian who was traveling through Asia that met the Dalai Lama and taught him that enlightenment can happen under any discipline as long as it's the practice of mindfulness. You know,
And being spiritual rather than, worshiping.
Yeah, well, there's the giant dogma between,
Sure.
or difference between dogma and practice.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Well,
but that's a
I
different
think-
and I
topic.
know, well,
you know,
and then
but-
similar, kind of on the same strand, I know a couple people who, maybe not atheists, but maybe more agnostic, that they'll go to church, but for the social part of it. because that's how the U.S. seems to work. That's where your social gatherings and
Well,
whatnot.
for some people in some communities, and people who don't buy it into that are ostracized, and those are the free thinkers. And that's what I was just all I was bringing up is the
careful
extremes.
about this upcoming democratic wave that's going to take over government, because whenever you get an ideology that seems so commonsensical to a lot of people, you create a frightful oppression for people that don't think it's so simple like that. Like Christianity, for example. If everybody was a Christian, there wouldn't be any problems, according to a lot of these people.
Exactly.
Because they're not Christians, see?
There's
Oh,
that.
but
That's
to
the
be honest,
problem.
but that's not really true, because if everybody was,
Yeah.
they'd still fight with each other over who
I
was
know.
It'd be
right.
something else.
My
yeah.
version of
Anything
God can
actually
beat up your
changes.
version of God.
Have we had conflict in the past? Yes. We'll most likely have conflict in the future. We most likely got conflict right now. Have we had greedy people in the past? We most likely got greedy people now. Have we had saintly-like people in the past? We've probably got saintly-like people right now.
I don't know if we had that 24-hour surveillance. Those people we thought were saints might not really be.
Well, I do. I think that's what that whole Peyton Place thing was. Everybody was watching everybody to see who was falling
Sure.
out.
Well,
Right.
I always,
Acting weird.
it's
You
always.
saw Pleasantville, didn't you?
Yeah.
Remember that? In the beginning there, everybody was doing everything.
All of a sudden, things start
That's-
turning into color.
Yeah. Color? What are we going to do with this? You know, they didn't know.
How can you hide that? Well,
And
I don't want
That's where we're
to.
at now. We're getting things thrown at us like quantum mechanics and relativity theory and Brave New World stuff
Oh, yeah.
all the time, that we are awash in change. The technology, just
Very
from the
much.
80s
Yeah.
till now, is unbelievable,
But
isn't it?
you're familiar with, I'm trying to remember which year they say this began. It was, I think, 88, but it was one year where the internet had already existed for a couple of years, but all of a sudden, like, everybody's having a lot more access. And they said that it was a year in the 80s. And that year, the cumulative base of human knowledge doubled because of this connectivity. And I think that had only happened once before that they knew of. I think it was once they were saying, but it was actually the same time period in which the Intercontinental Railroad went through.
Oh.
The coasts were connected. All of a sudden, learning is knowledge was shared. It
Quicker.
it blossoms. Well, since that happened, though, let's just say 88. I'm probably wrong, but anyway, I'm in the ballpark. It has happened every single year since.
Double their knowledge every year.
Yes. So at this point right now, I'm sorry for being horrid at the math, but human knowledge has got to be 300 something whatever times more than it was 25 years ago. I mean, that's math. That's
Well, sure.
No wonder we
It
feel
is-
unsettled.
It is superficial. If you think what intelligence really is, I call that the intellect.
Well-
The intellect is the stuff that you can just accumulate almost endlessly. Just more data, more information. But there is a part of ourselves that is more like a child. That's what I call the intelligent part of our brain. The intelligence does not rely on the past or the future or any kind of thought. It just acts immediately in the moment. It's instinctual and direct. Like Zen masters are this form of intelligence. They don't get caught up in the dogma of shoulds and shouldn't. People that study Confucius, they like all the rules and they like to have it all listed and everything like that. So I say that in order for a brain to fully function, it has to synthesize and realize that information in and of itself can only go so far. And in Hinduism, they call that Vedanta. That just means that you learn that there's other parts of your brain besides just gathering more and more knowledge. More and more knowledge doesn't really develop this other part of yourself that's more
No.
like cosmic.
Like putting in practice type.
Like children have it, and the Zen masters have it, and the basketball players have it. They have the zones where they go, and they're not even humans. They're just, biological experiences that
It's a great way to put
are
it.
amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? I mean, how did that happen? You shoot pool sometimes, and the ball does these amazing things. If you could have thought it through, it would have been the most amazing shot in the world. But
True,
just by doing
exactly.
it accidentally, the thing ricochets off of 5 balls, and
Why didn't you call that?
why didn't you call that? Because you couldn't see it, right? Intellectually, you couldn't see it. So the only barrier to what I call the superconscious is this intellect, strengthened with opinionated knowledge. And I think that people, as they gather understanding about themselves, find that there's a mountaintop within themselves. And there's only room for one person. And I got in so much trouble the other day with Rick Todd telling me, what's this mountaintop crap?
Oh my God.
I tried to get
I
him
hadn't
to
heard that name in
read,
so long.
Black Elk Speaks, but it's the same thing with Black Elk, that you find that there's a center of yourself that is this intelligence. It doesn't rely on how much you read. There are people that can play instruments that live out in the Kalahari better than our best players that have studied their whole life, because they just live with the instrument. You know, they are the instrument. They become the instrument.
Well, and it's a normal thing for them. They've never had known that they weren't supposed to know how to play it. They were just grew up with it. It was part of, like you said, part of them.
If I may, though, as a counterpoint to that, and only this one little bit, there's great gypsy musicians sometimes, but gypsies live in such a tight-knit culture that they say with, say, a great gypsy guitar player, you can tell by the time he's 12 how good he's ever going to get, because he won't get as much outside influence. He won't be motivated by all these different things. So often people who really actually are isolated, they might do something in their own way really well, but there's a limitation that is also put on us by not being exposed to, I mean, at least in music.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
and it holds true in visual art too.
I
Take
call
an
that
isolated
professional
culture, they
music
won't understand perspective.
versus
and-
inspirational music. Inspirational music can just occur.
Right, right.
But professional music, you have to study and read and learn the systems and reproduce music from the past. And then if you're lucky enough to write your own music, it has to be based on these foundations of
Yeah, like Ravi
downtown
Shankar.
skills. Yeah, like Ravi Shankar. Most traditional musical systems are based on some sort of a system that has to be learned. But I still contend that the greatest singers, the greatest musicians, the greatest artists, the greatest anything are wild. See, like nature. You got to have this wildness. Nietzsche put it really well when he said that you must have chaos in your life to give birth to the dancing star, which I think is the creative force. You got to let go of all the safety valves and all the things that you know. So a guy like Neil Young says that professional musicians can't go where he wants to go. They know too much about music, whereas he gets these sort of idiot savants that play with him, where they don't know they can't go there.
Mm-hmm.
And they go there, and they try something completely that has never been seen before. To me, that's real music. The other stuff is what I call professional music. You learn it. You have to learn it.
But it can be beautiful.
It's all beautiful. It's just the great thing. The difference between good and great is about this much. And it's the great, all great things are wild, see? If you don't have wildness, you don't have chaos, if you don't have the unknown, you won't get great.
Well, I
you
think
get very, very good, but you won't get great.
that's why, like you were saying, that it's great for children because they don't know their boundaries yet. They're willing to try anything and do anything until they're told no or shown no, or they see something that says, "Oh, I guess I can't do that." They think they can fly until they jump one time and fall on their face. They're going to try everything, and that's and that's why our mind gets closed as we get older. I know I can't fly. It would be cool, but so that limits that part of my thinking forever. I'm never going to be able to fly. Where a 5-year-old is, I'm going to try again.
Yeah.
It didn't work out this time, but if I try again, that might work. And so that part of his brain or her brain is still open.
And eventually some humans
Will
figured
fly.
out how to do it.
It's possible.
Look at
When one of
cell
these kids someday,
Somebody said, wouldn't it be great if you could talk to anybody in the world? Now we got one right here. Everybody has
a
it.
computer in your pocket.
Somebody had to think of it, right, to do it.
Scary part's that it only took 50 years to go from the Wright brothers to putting a nuclear weapon in a plane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the scary thing about
Well-
what all that accumulative knowledge that we were talking about is shoots ahead so much faster than our shared cultural awareness. You know, I have heard a lot of people who talk, for instance, to use Trump as an example again, that they don't think he's truly a Hitler because they think Hitler was very aware of what he was doing and it was all by design.
Okay.
Where Trump does not understand at all the ramifications of his actions. At least, like I was listening to Tom Hartman talk about that yesterday.
You know, I
don't
used
if you
to
guys
think
ever
that
listened to
about
Tom.
Oh, yeah.
when George W. was president, how, you know, the wars and how evil, and, you know, I just couldn't stand him. Now he looks great compared to who we have in office now.
Yeah, who knew he wouldn't be the worst in our lifetime?
Yeah, exactly. And so, like, now it's like, and so at the time I was thinking, well, he's just too stupid. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's just too stupid. Well, now we've got somebody that I feel is even stupider. And so this is, and it's even worse, obviously. I mean, this is a person that we have in office that has never been shown consequences because he's never.
Well, I don't think he's psychologically able to accept them,
I
period.
don't think
he's
so.
a true narcissist, and it doesn't matter what he's been exposed to, he'll still play by his own rules. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, put him, you know, doesn't, any environment he's in, he'll still behave the same way he's behaving
Mm-hmm.
now.
Well, what's that say about America? Because we elected him.
Well, I just saw a scary statistic earlier today that hate crimes have doubled in 2017 since he was elected.
Mm-hmm.
Doubled.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
What are you
and,
gonna
and
do?
everyone was crying, you know, about
I think-
Ferguson and all these things that when Obama was president, you know, that these were bad things. We aren't hearing about these new ones. The media has been told by the powers that be that they cannot talk about these
Well,
white
I think
hate
also,
crimes.
also, I think that there's news flying at them so fast. Like, it's such a, oh yeah, you don't like that? Watch me do this. Watch me say this. Watch me do that. Yeah, I mean, it's at such a frenzied pace that, you know, it's an intentional attempt to just fatigue the viewer.
Well,
yeah.
but you know,
We'll keep the attention of the
And,
viewer
you know,
away
part
from
of
the
this-
real stuff. He's the circus, and he's the bread in the circus right now.
Mm.
You know, what do we need to know all that crap that we know about him? We don't. But because he keeps getting in our face, every time we talk about him, we feed him.
right? And I didn't want him to
No.
be part of our show.
Oh, sorry. It's hard not to.
I know. Well, you know,
It's
a
such
lot-
an obvious example for so many things when you're
is.
talking about, geez, look what society is willing to do sometimes.
Well, you know, a lot of these news stories that, you know, we keep getting thrown at us, you know, we're supposed to get, you know, different perspective of, you know, every story has a different view. I mean, when, have you read like In Cold Blood? It's just amazing. And, but when you get into the heads of the killers, it's like, they were just desperate. They were, you know, you almost kind of felt for them in the way that Capote wrote that. It was like, you just felt for the guy. This poor guy, you know, he's kind of lame, and then, but what about the family? They didn't do anything. They, you know, but they're the victims, and so it's like there's two sides to every story. And it seems like today when we hear something about our president or about how great our economy or the stock market is doing, and it's because our
Was.
president has
Changed recently.
yeah, but it was supposedly it was our new president who did it, and I was like, yeah, okay, I'll believe you, and but remember last time our stock market flew this high, it was a little scary afterwards, right? And so it's like, but there's those perspectives that they're not telling us. You know, they're telling us, oh, it's really great, it's because our president did this for us. But wait a minute, this is signs that something else is going on, that all these market changes.
It's a tulip bulb craze right now.
Yeah, well, these market changes are really the heads up, changing money in hands so that they can keep more in their pockets, and then when it finally trickles down to us, there's not going to be anything left. That's what they're doing right now. That's why the market is booming, is because they're pushing this money around and getting it into safe spots
Well,
for them.
Let me tell you one reason the market is booming. Any sane investor who has studied history would be shorting this market, and a lot of them have. But if you know what happens in a short sale, you just bet down a lot of them are naked, and you have to supply the shares so that the idea of a short sale is that these people panic. I don't know if you know about options or not, but you bet that this,
Little bit.
you say there's a range that the stock will fall into. Now, normal people say, well, most stocks are going to fall within this range, and I can bet that it won't go all the way past that. But in these boom markets, is that it goes way past what you imagine it's actually worth. So you have to buy the stock in order to give it back to somebody in a call. You know, that's what a call is.
right.
Call means that they're going to take it away from you. They're going to call it away from you. You have to buy the stock. So a lot of short sellers who are accurate are getting caught in these short squeezes where they have to buy the stock in order to fulfill these ideas that make
To make it
logical
happen.
sense, but because we're in an irrational time, they're not logical.
Correct. Yes, and then that's when things start falling apart.
And that's when you start wondering, what's anything worth anyway?
Well,
there's not.
I mean, it's just numbers on a piece of paper.
It
but
is.
people go, oh, I have a heart attack. you
But
know?
it's gambling. It's really just illegal gambling, you know.
There's a
That's all it
false
is.
equivalence made frequently too. The stock market does not represent how the economy is doing.
Absolutely.
And we always fall into this trap, and I understand because that's what's put forward by the media. But the stock market is obviously not representation of how average families are doing or anything along those lines. Same way unemployment numbers do not represent people looking for work.
Correct.
You know, I think maybe we do a better service maybe to like viewers and stuff if we even like kind of explained how some of these false equivalences come to be, you know, and like the media bias for fairness puts them in a position where they never actually tell a true even-handed
Well,
story,
and-
because they put, like, just to expand for a second, you know, and I know this is kind of beat to death, and maybe a lot of people who would watch the show are very aware of this, and maybe this will be boring to them.
Massively falsified world.
But, you know, say global warming, you have 97% of scientists who agree that, you know, it's being created by man. And say you have 3% who don't. But when they talk about it on the news, they present one person for each. And that's
Yeah.
not fair. What you would have to do fair representation would be to give 97 times more attention to those representing the 97%, and only 3% of the time to, you know what I'm saying?
Gotcha,
Because
yeah.
that's
That
the
would be fair.
That'd be tyranny of the mass.
well, but the point is, they're so hooked on this fair thing that they give voice to the ridiculous. Like when they want to talk about, say, Social Security or immigration or what have you, they're giving equal time, quote unquote, to two sides of the argument. That often there might be another side to the argument, but if it's ridiculous,
Well,
you don't have to air it.
Ideas are often unpopular when they first come out. Like this guy that did the continental drift thing, this German. He figured it out 100 years ago that the continents were drifting apart, but he couldn't get anybody in the mainstream to go along with him. None of the scientists, they all called him crazy. What a lunatic. The Earth doesn't move.
Okay, well, let me ask this though. Okay, so if we don't want to limit that and say so what the media is doing is okay, because then why do we still have it where they're giving all this voice to all these things that I'm referring to as nonsense, but people thinking outside the box are still not welcome to share of their thoughts publicly? So what the media is doing isn't changing that at all, right?
I'm just pointing out you can't go by just strictly popular.
No, I agree fully. But I think when you are relying upon news sources to inform people, and granted,
If you are.
and it seems that most Americans are, not saying that's wise, but but it seems to be what the case is. You know, there used to be regulations upon them, where if it was too biased, if it was shown to not really be news, it would have been taken off the air.
Libel.
Yeah.
Once upon a time.
You know, back in 60s, 70s.
When did that law just pass, though, recently, where they decided that they weren't?
It was. I think it was statutes expired or
Oh, okay.
something, and they weren't renewed, and
Yeah.
it was like 15 years ago now, though. I
Yeah.
mean, it's been a
Right.
while. But yeah, they had to. The news wasn't supposed to generate a profit for the network. The news was the network's investment back into society. That's what it was supposed to, quote unquote, be. You know, whether you can ideally ever do that. You know, I mean, Walter Cronkite had to tell everybody when Vietnam was a lost cause. You know.
Oh yeah, yeah, that was the end of the
Well,
war.
you know, that's another thing I even notice when I watch a sports game, watching football. The commentators that are telling you what's going on, and so there's a bad call by a ref. The commentator will not say it's a bad call. He waits until it's been reviewed by the upper people, and you know they'll speculate why it may or may not be a bad call, but they will never call it a bad call until it's been reviewed and displayed, and then they'll analyze why it was a bad call or why it wasn't a bad call. They'll never come out and say, well, that was a bad play, that ref should have called holding on that player. The commentators will never flat out say that. They will wait and they'll go, oh, yeah, that didn't look right. Let's see if they review that. And then they don't review it.
Once in a while, they really do. I don't think you watch a lot of sports, to be honest.
I actually do watch a lot of football.
Crazy call. I can't believe that.
'Cause I've seen some amazingly bad calls where they instantly were like, "That's a horrible call."
Sometimes, yeah, but it just seems
I
like
think the refs are a suspect myself.
That's a horrible job.
No, I don't think.
Well-
I don't think they're 100% honest. I really don't. I think that they get
it's
their
hard to
marching
not be
orders.
biased, isn't it?
Well, that's it. Even if they are trying to be honest, I think they just can't help themselves. They just see reality a certain way.
Well, here's the $1,000,000 question, and I think we were talking about this before the show started. Can somebody be above those motivations? Because they're rather, I mean, one could refer to them as base and say that the goal of social integration is to hopefully move, to like some sort of altruism, some sort of recognition of symbiotic relationships between oneself and fellow man, nature, blah blah.
That's best.
But can someone do that? I mean, obviously,
In
some people.
Shangri-La, they can, but
Maybe. But I mean, here's one example that I like.
It's a story about a man who plants a tree for his grandson to enjoy. You know. I
There's
mean,
that.
people do those things all the time.
Well, so like here's something that a lot of people think of. There's a soulmate out there. Everyone has that true person that they're going to be able to communicate with and have a perfect relationship with. Well, now that it's more out in the open, this LGBTQ thing, at one point we all thought we were limited, male, female. My soulmate is going to be a male if that's what I like, or vice versa. And so we all thought that. But what if we just stopped looking at looks and gender and really just connected 100% with our minds? And then we find out that our soulmate is a fish. Are we, you know what I mean?
or an
What?
environment
Just see it
to
coming.
go into.
So what do we think then? I mean,
Well-
or is our altruism then? Are we like, well, that's obviously not going to work because I can't live underwater. I mean,
I think a lot of people have wishful thinking. They go, they brought up with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and Prince Charming's going to come and kiss them and make their lives wonderful. As you get older, you start to find out a lot of that fairy tale stuff is very difficult to produce because there's all this downside attached to it also. Prince Charming turned out to be an alcoholic wife beater, after a while.
he got
So
bored.
I had to get rid of him, and on the second, and what do the kids need orthodontic? There's all these
Well,
things that take you away from living happily ever after. Well, that's what's real. That's not the ideal. The
Right, we
ideal-
can't live in our brains, unfortunately. We need to eat and sleep and
But there does seem to be some social causation for why we feel inclined to make up stories for, it's a lot of these start as nursery rhymes, as fables for children, and
Comfort food for the brain.
or are we sharing cultural ideals or ideas with them? Is that the way we're imprinting that upon? I mean, like there's probably a lot of
Absolutely.
Yeah.
because there's themes to these in all the cultures around the world.
Absolutely.
And but I mean, it's an interesting conversation though, is whether or not that's some people would say, well, these things are lies we tell children, and it's misleading, and it gives them a false shape of the world.
Yeah.
But at the same time, are we imprinting on them what we wish the world could be, and by setting the goal here, just aim in that direction and hope you do better than what we knew yesterday?
There's
You
always
find out
that.
more, better, and hope all have kind of run together. I hope
Mhm.
that I can get more and better.
There's
But,
no trying, there's
to
just
look
doing.
directly
like
at
Yoda.
reality, like Einstein did. He found out that you don't get more and better, you get the best, and that's what you actually have right now. I like the German idea, the German philosopher's idea of the historical dialectic, and that what we call our story of our lives is it's like a TV show that we're on that travels through time, through consciousness. The actual universe itself may not move. At the speed of light, there may be just this total stillness, like they're always saying, be still and know that I am God kind of thing. So the mind of God might be very still, like they say with a pool of water. Still water allows you to see completely. The moment you think, you create these ripples and distortions, and you tend to go for what it is you think you know. So the difference between the superconscious mind, which is the clear water without distortion, and the one that's conscious is that one is identifying with all the wave action. And that's where fear comes in. Fear comes in when you try to rigidify reality in a preferred direction. You try to spin it.
Well, you try to dictate to it.
You want to, and if you notice in the tarot deck, they've noticed this a long time ago, that the Fool is the 0 card. The Fool has no intentions, but the 1 card is the Magician. See, the Magician is always looking for ways to use energy to create tricks and pull the rabbit out of the hat or just make the woman disappear. The Fool never thinks like that. The Fool is always in a state of complete embedment in the consciousness of the universe. But most of us cannot identify with the Fool, because why? He's holy. Holy comes from the word whole. See, in order to be holy, you have to think holistically, which is what I call the synthetic mind, or synthesis mind, where everything is blended together, the yays and the nays and everything. And even in physics nowadays, they have a thing called superpositionality, which is what quantum computers are going to be built on in the future, where the object, what they call the superconducting quantum interference devices that run these computers, is neither positively nor negatively charged. It's both positively and negatively charged simultaneously, which is something that's very difficult for us to comprehend.
Yeah.
But you get these weird kind of things when you get down in the realm of superconductivity. And if you really extend your mind, I mean, if you want to go way far down the rabbit hole, you find out that trillions and trillions of years in the future, the entropy reaches an end, and all of the universe breaks down into its constituent parts and becomes positronium, which is an exotic element. It's in reality. It's an exotic element.
So that sounds made up.
For 4 trillionths of a second in our temperate zone, it exists in a state of balance with the positive and the negative spinning around each other like a yin-yang symbol. But normally, when you get antimatter and matter together, which is the difference between a positron and an electron, one's positively charged, one's negatively charged. When they hit, they usually create a flash of light we call a photon, and virtually everything in our universe is built. Our universe is built on
Right.
the electrons. But if you look at the supersymmetry of the entire universe, where everything breaks down into its constituent parts, you end up with the simplest kind of thing, completely frozen at the absolute zero. Just like if you go back to the Big Bang, you find absolute heat at a certain point where all the forces of the universe combine back into a primary force. They don't separate. It's only through the cooling down of that superplasmonic state. It's even beyond plasma. They call it a superfluidic state. But imagine these two states existing simultaneously, one with infinite or absolute heat, one with absolute cold.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at it that's what Einstein saw. He saw that it's all happening right now. You know, so whenever we attempt to change things, we usually create some sort of oppression for something else. Whenever you try to be good in one area, like building roads and making cars and things, we thought, oh, that's great, isn't it?
Correct.
You create an oppression, and all the land we're sucking up, and all the wildlife we're displacing. And all.
Exactly.
So one door opens, the other door closes. So I say, if you get back to the 0 point, which is where we are right now, everything's in harmony. And that superstring theory is based on the idea that we're resonating structures, what they call oscillating harmonics. We're oscillating harmonics right now. That's really what we are. We're not human as much as we're oscillating harmonics.
Keeping the universe in balance.
The universe, whether we do it or it does it itself,
Mm-hmm.
it can't get out of balance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's our natural eccentricity that makes us think that, and we're keeping it in balance. No, we're just apart.
Yeah,
Right.
And
it's already together.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, it's nothing that we're consciously doing. I mean, it's just us existing is keeping everything in balance. The
Well,
the
it's
Earth
keeping
is
our
here.
awareness of it in existence, but free of us, it's still there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, but yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to stretch your mind that far down the rabbit hole, though, to the speed of light, where everything stops.
Right.
You know.
Because we couldn't imagine experience. Yeah, we couldn't. We've never been in that kind of an experience. We know it exists.
Well, the conversations. This is not on topic whatsoever where we're at, though. So I don't know if you want to
Well,
keep talking
it was
about
a little
this.
bit when he was saying though,
perception.
really about the.
I was going to expound too, but I was just, you know,
the talking about the technology that we embrace, roads and cars and everything, great, awesome, but we're killing the planet at the same time. We're little rabbit isn't going to be very happy when his house is plowed over so that you could drive to the grocery store. But that's kind of the perception thing. Which one is good?
well, and I, you know,
Perception, it's your perspective.
Perspective of it all.
and I think it was before the show started that we were talking about this also. But when you're talking about the little rabbit, maybe let me turn that into a metaphor and say that what we're really talking about is all of us are these cogs, and which perspective are we going to let history be told from? The one that's already in commonplace, which is the point of view of the corporation and the power state, the power structure, or is it going to be based upon the well-being of the average person within the social
Well, that's been
construct?
one of my themes in the last couple of my shows. Is I always get it wrong, but the victor's right history
That's right.
was what Winston Churchill quote.
Yeah.
But that's just it. The victor's if I beat you up and you're laying on the floor, you can't. What story? Your story's not going to be told.
Yeah, you attacked me.
But the Inquisition was a success, but we're still telling the story of the crud they did.
That's true. That's true.
Okay, you take something like the Inquisition, and you know historically how horrible it was, and you think about the Holocaust, where Hitler told the German people that we have to get rid of these undesirables. It's kind of like Trump right now. Get rid of these undesirables.
Oh yeah, comparing the Dreamers to members
And
of
what he did was he
MS-13.
empowered
That's just
people.
ridiculous.
He empowered people to go out into the community and hunt these people down.
Yeah.
and actually have hunting parties where they would shoot the Jews, like we shoot deer and stuff, because they felt in their heart of hearts that they were doing good for Germany.
They did, absolutely.
See, and now we got something like that happening now with this
And
resurgent
yeah, when you
patriotism.
try to tell a person that though that it's similar, they're like, oh no, it's not.
But I think that we're.
That's right.
I
They
think
didn't see it then either.
Right,
You
right.
know,
I thought-
they don't see it now.
I don't think we should lend to it and refer to that as patriotism, though, because that's not patriotism. That's
It's in their minds.
yeah, but that's tribalism. It's not.
Or is it more
patriotism.
like nationalism in a way?
To them, that's what's right.
They feel,
that's
yeah.
the right thing to do. That's why we have wars, go out and kill the bad guys. See? And who's the bad guy? The bad guy is the guy that doesn't think like you do.
Right.
You know, they may not be any worse than we are. The hardest thing for America to understand is that to a lot of people in the world, we are the bad guy.
Mhm.
Oh, absolutely.
If you ever see that movie with
Don't
Michael
think for a
Douglas,
moment that Hitler thought he wasn't the good guy.
oh no, he thought he was doing
Oh,
great.
exactly.
Everybody is motivated by their own sense of good.
Mm-hmm.
What they're associating as the positive, like that's why he was able to go up. That he made it his life. He believed in it. He thought
Yeah.
that was
Absolutely.
just and noble. I'm not saying any of that crap
Same with
was.
the Rush
I'm
Limbaugh.
just saying,
He does the same thing.
right?
Get
It's
rid of them damn liberals. They're thinking outside the box too much.
All right, we got to wrap it up. They're going to
Okay.
kick us off the TV. They're tired of listening to us. We have a couple minutes left, but I want to remind everybody this is Oh Say Can You See, brought to you by the CTV Society. We are here the first, third, fifth Wednesday of the month at 7 o'clock. We have on Wednesdays and Tuesdays reruns at 6. Every Tuesday? Every Tuesday we have reruns at 6. Tonight we were talking about the difference between good and bad and how is it interpreted and what makes one think this is good and that's bad, or that's good and this is bad. It's we don't even know. It's kind of intrinsic that we just think that what we're doing is right, and some people use religion to tell them what they have to do is right. Some people just, by example, watching other people, I'm going to follow along and do what everybody else is doing. Or some people will do their own research and say, oh, you know what, this is how we should do it because that obviously has the best results. But everyone has their own opinion of what's good, what's bad. Thank you both for discussing this with me. It went so smooth.
Swimmingly.
It went swimmingly.
I knew it had to be about done. I ran out of coffee.
Yeah, and like
Keep talking.
some of
Oh, here we go.
some of the things that I wanted to bring up, you touched on it for just a second, but being mindful and then just paying attention to people and things around you. You can see the good and the bad in everything almost if you're just paying attention. Some people will just look at something and instantly, oh, well, that's horrible, that's disgusting. But take a step back. Why is that happening? Why is that person doing that? And then they're like, oh, well, wait a minute. Now I get it. A thief, he's stealing a loaf of bread and everyone's pissed off. But did you see that he hasn't ate in 4 days? He didn't have a choice.
Frank Girard used to always talk about that. He's founder of all this, and that everybody believes they're doing right. And if you really want to change the world, you got to stop objectifying people and find ways to connect with people. And it was like
Perfect.
it was a real Taoist sort of
Well,
thing. I don't think he
wanna
practiced any
appreciate
form of
the world
Taoism,
as it
but
is. I think that intelligence lies in the world as it is, not in trying to make it better or more.
But
gotta
understanding it
You gotta
helps.
see
He
how
just-
it is right now.
he just felt that if he could get people to stop seeing the world in us and them and realizing that connection, that things would just naturally
Start to do that. Each person has to do that for themselves. Follow legal